considers themselves an executive or has like a C or a VP in their title? Hands up. Okay, cool. Who in this room is a software engineer or has something to do with software? Probably shipped production code in the last couple of weeks, hopefully weeks. Cool, thank you. Last but not least, who is enjoying Bangkok so far? What's happening? Why are not all of the hands are going up? Okay, fair enough. A couple of facts about me. I'm Lars. I'm a principal architect at NFQ, and I live and work in Munich. People always ask me what my job is. I really don't know exactly, but it's something about turning customers' business strategy into technology capabilities and technical capabilities into business strategy. Something like that. That's a mouthful for helping customers. To do that successfully, I work with executives as well as technology practitioners alike. Over the years, I came to observe many situations in where the two, or should I say fractions, just didn't know enough about each other to collaborate successfully. As I'm fundamentally interested in better ways to build software as well as building better software, this is a topic I find particularly interesting. Sound okay? So this talk is the attempt to discuss a couple of ideas so that we can understand each other a little bit better. My hypothesis is quite simple. If business people would know a little bit more about software, and software practitioners would understand a bit more about the business side, we could build both better software as well as better businesses. Today is about 5 ideas to build this common understanding to be more successful. These are not finished ideas or recipes. You're not going out of this room with like, okay, this is what I need to do. Instead, what I hope to do is to have a couple of conversation starters, I don't know, for your next company party or something like that. If you stand next to a software developer as an executive and don't know what to talk about, maybe it's some of these or the other way around, right? Let's get going. The first idea is to build situational awareness in our organization and at large and in our teams. Imagine this kind of scenario. End of the year approaches and a lot of what should we do next year kind of conversations are happening at this exemplary software company that we're talking about. Everybody is excited about a new initiative targeting a significantly younger target audience. Mobile app it should be, a mobile app it is. And the new year begins, and after only a couple of weeks, our development team at this mid-sized company has a first prototype, or not a first prototype, has a first minimal version put together, a minimal but really slick mobile app that does just enough for our purpose. The big day approaches where the team demos their app to C-level management. The air is filled with excitement, the demo goes well, everybody is thrilled. Before closing, the presenter outlines the next steps. Amongst them is, okay, we're going to plan and ship next week. This is when the mood in the room really changes. Yeah? CEO puts it quite bluntly, there's no way we're going to ship this minimal thing. The typical discussion arises, all parties agree on an extended scope, yada, 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 but there's a lot of frustration going on. What's happening in situations like that? Invisible to the parties involved, oftentimes there's a fundamental disagreement over the situation we're in. Do we aim to attract new customers? Do we move existing customers to a new platform? We have a misalignment, and that misalignment comes from the lack of a shared situational awareness. Situational awareness means understanding the context of our efforts. Where are we? Where are we going? Why? And we build situational awareness through conversation. And we have tools and frameworks that help us facilitate these conversations. Let's look at a couple of those. First one is 3X. Ken Beck of extreme programming fame came up with a 3X model to help us understand where we are in the life cycle of a product. when our job is to attract new customers, we likely work on a convex problem. Convex problems have their own set of rules or constraints. The sooner we ship our software, the quicker we can harvest value. Any additional user of our software is positive. Even limited functionality is much better than no functionality. Being fast is critically important. A startup developing non-critical software is often like that. Entering a new market is like that. Shipping small increments, bit by bit, capturing more value. In the convex world, we probably choose a few relatively coarse-grained system tests, for example. We employ continuous deployment. We experiment a lot, throw ideas away that didn't work, and build on ideas that have traction. The opposite is also true. If we are too slow in this context, we are going to lose the opportunity that we have in front of us. Let's contrast that with the opposite case. Think big bank, think big insurance company. Oftentimes when we improve or replace an existing successful piece of software with a new piece of software, it's a concave problem. We will need a heavy upfront investment until we are able to ship anything. It needs to be big enough until we can capture any significant value. And we have to be incredibly careful not to break things. It's typically true for any kind of mission-critical software that's already quote-unquote out there, and is generating profits. In the concave space, we have a higher quality bar, much less experimentation, much more work on correctness, edge cases, specifications. We will write a lot of unit tests, coverage bit. We're very careful not to break the experience for existing customers. But concave and convex spaces are only the two extremes at the beginning and the end of our life cycle. In reality, we might start in a convex space, but eventually transition. So let's put that together, and that's what 3X is about. Looks something like that. At the beginning, we have the explore phase, very chaotic. Then we go over to expand. We found a market, we found a product that works, and it's about building up the capabilities. And at the end, it's really extraction mode. It's the small optimizations, it's the planning. A few of you probably have noticed already that this model maps quite well onto a much older and much more commonly used model called Conway. Don't mind the pronunciation. It's a Welsh word, so I try my best, but it's probably wrong. We don't have enough time to explore differences and similarities in detail, but it looks roughly like this. Yeah? We go from chaotic to complex to complicated to clear. Chaotic maps roughly onto explore, and complex maps roughly into the expand track. Complicated, clear, we're in the extract hard. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to put it, reality is even more complex. In a typical product, we have different contexts all applying at the same time. Imagine our authentication capability may be already quite mature. Sure. It's authentication after all. But we started, let's say, integrating a large language model last year, and this is still an exploration. We're figuring out stuff. We have a lot of chaos going on. It's fine. So in the same product, we have different maturities of different capabilities that we have in front of us. It's even worse than that, because every capability, think about authentication or large language models, is a composition of other capabilities as well. Yeah? Think about something trivial like a blog. Let's say my business is a blog, is offering a blog to readers. Blog software needs hosting, needs runtime software, needs hardware, needs electricity, needs bandwidth. When I say bandwidth and electricity, none of you would think that it's a wise idea to immediately build a power plant. Probably not. It's probably a very clear, idea. So at the end, we might buy, or we will buy some of these capabilities, but we will build others. The question is always which ones should we build and which ones should we buy, where do we run it, and these are questions of technology strategy. Simon Wardley came up with Wardley maps to visualize discussions on strategy and movement in a strategic space. We can use that to aid as well business strategy and tech strategy discussion. Wardley maps are another great tool to build and discuss situational awareness and to understand our value chain. Again, we don't have time to dig really deeply into them. We can probably have an hour talk just about that particular subject, but just in short, we can see here on the y-axis is the visibility to the customer in the value chain, and on the x-axis is the evolution of the part that we are talking about. So let's make this very practical and go back to our fantastic blog company. For some reason, we have a custom-built blog. The blog needs hosting, the hosting needs hardware. And we can make this as granular or as coarse-grained as we want it to be, but for now, this is my map. This is interesting to understand where we are today, but we can add another layer, and that's the question of where should we be? Probably not particularly intuitive that in this year of the Lord 2024, we are building our own blog. Probably not a good investment of our time. So we can add movement to our strategy discussion and think about, well, the blog is probably not something we should build on our own, so that we end up with something like that. With all of these tools, the value is mostly in the conversation as opposed to the document itself. These tools can help us to visualize and express ideas, but that are subconsciously lingering and create productive disagreement and eventual alignment over them. Difference in assumptions that might be fatal down the road can be discovered and resolved early. That's why I like these tools as conversation starters, not as means to an end. As an executive, ask yourself, do we build and communicate situational awareness in our organization? Do we understand the tools available? Do we use them? As developers, does your team have enough context on the situation they are in? Do you talk about it? Are you largely in agreement? Why? Why not? How often do you reflect on the current situation we're in, or if we're moving from one context into a different one? The second idea is financial literacy. Let's start imagining the following. It's a sunny day in September. We have our senior developer, Jordan, on her way to work, and she has an idea. We should prepay our cloud bill in advance for the next 3 years. Does a little bit of research, roughly 30% in savings. The workload of her company is quite predictable, so that seems like a very good idea. She goes to her boss is excited, boss goes to their boss, more excitement fills the air, you know the drill. Eventually it reaches the CFO, and CFO says, nope, over my cold dead body, not going to happen. This is a terrible idea. CFO mumbles something about free cash flow and moves on with their day. In a different universe though, CFO is excited as everybody else, and Jordan gets a pat on the back and maybe a chunky bonus, and everybody's happy. What we have here, our clever developer Jordan thought about the problem of cloud is expensive through the lens of overall efficiency. Their CFO, on the other hand, had a different optimization goal in mind. Because the company is on an acquisition spree, our imaginable company here, free cash flow is more important than short-term. Is more important in the short term so that they can buy other companies. So paying yearly installments, even if they are higher over a 3-year period, are preferable in that case. What this small example should tell us is that in order to drive successful initiatives, it's critical for us to understand the financial fundamentals of our business. We need to become financially literate. We probably have a couple of internal key performance indicators and metrics flying around in your organization, but I typically like to start from the source. So we typically have 2 interesting sources of information. First, an income statement, And it all depends on the market you're operating in, but roughly you have an income statement that shows financial performance for a given period. And second, we have a balance sheet that shows what a company owns at a specific date. This is the most bare bones version of a balance sheet. Yeah? So let's say you work in a company and your job is to develop custom software. That custom software hopefully somehow leads to revenue. An e-commerce platform where customers buy physical goods, a SaaS offering, recurring membership fees, whatever. Yeah? So the software we ship is liked by the software we ship is hopefully liked by our customers, so they buy more. That's revenue here. Because financial people are very creative, because the top line is also called top line. On the other hand, the company pays you a salary and your colleagues and maybe rents an office and provides you with work equipment and a chair or whatnot, rents compute, all of these things. These are all costs. And roughly deducting costs from revenue give us the net profit, sometimes also called net earnings or net income. Because this is the bottom, coming back to creativity, this is also called bottom line. Next to the income statement, we have a balance sheet, and the balance sheet tells us what we own. What the cash position, outstanding invoices, debt, and so on and so forth. And software development costs obviously something, but depending on the context and our accounting rules, it can be typically expensed as just a cost, so easy, or it can be capitalized. That means that we treat it similarly like a physical good. So if we buy a piece of machinery and we spend, I don't know, $100 for it, $100 is not enough, but we we pay $100 for it, then we can activate that in our So if we can capitalize on our software expenses, that might change the game on how you think about investments in your teams. So instead of just expensing them as a cost, it might change the conversation on headcount. Ask yourself: are you aware if your job right now is supposed to affect mostly revenue or profit? Does that change in your daily work how you approach the development of your particular service or platform? Does your company simply expense software development, or does it capitalize on the cost? Again, switch of sceneries. After weeks of intense research and discussions, our CEO Alex has figured out the core pillars for their new company strategy. Customer centricity is all that counts. The mission: rebuild the value proposition through the eye of the customer, bring the organization as closely as possible to the customer. To enable that, a reorganization is put in place. Teams are reshuffled, responsibilities are reassigned, changes managed. What was formerly a functional organization is reorganized into a cell structure. Customer service and the product development teams that enable them are now co-located and function as a single group. Customer support engineers, product managers, business analysts, designers are all part of the same cell now. The same goes for sales and marketing and their respective product development teams. To move as quickly as possible, these cells are supposed to operate as independently as possible, take their own decisions, experiment, try again, fail again. In the first few months, everybody's excited, tries their best, the energy is there, but the hallway conversations relatively quickly paint a different picture. There's a lot of whispering about frustration and lack of pace. After 6 months, it becomes blatantly clear the organization has come to a grinding halt. In fact, the last deployment of anything to production happened 4 weeks ago in an organization where daily deployments were previously the norm. What happened here? Or what could have happened here is that the new structure was fundamentally incompatible with the structure of the software or the system the organization is tasked to work on. Even worse, the structure of the software was not at all considered when planning for the reorganization. Because the organization that is working on software and the software that is being worked on form a socio-technical system, changing one without the other will inevitably lead to a costly mismatch. We are really hesitant with rules in software engineering, but that's probably as close as we get to a rule. Any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is the copy of the organization's communication structure. Let that sink in for a moment. The implications are quite something. We cannot effectively change an organizational structure without changing the system the organization is tasked with. The parts of the system, communication flow, and delineations must match those of the organization. Remember my story from before, we started with a functional organization. That means all engineers had easy access to all other engineers. From that has evolved a system that does not have terribly clear boundaries, but instead most parts will interact with most other parts because that's the easy path. One side effect is that change in one place can lead to an unforeseen effect in a totally different place. That's called coupling, and we have a tightly coupled system. That coupling isn't such a big deal in our organization, though. If I have a problem, I walk over to my colleague, we solve it together, and all is fine. Of course, such an organization has downsides that the reorganization tried to address. The engineering group is probably not terribly close to the customer, and so on and so forth. But communication inside the functional group is super efficient, but communication with the other groups is less so. That's exactly the weakness. And now the redesign of our organization made communication inside of the engineering organization deliberately harder and instead prioritized ease of communication with other roles. What was previously an easy fix now takes days to figure out because the one engineer that could help me is now in a totally different group with entirely different goals and priorities. So what took 5 minutes before now takes me days of first, finding the right person, convincing the person to actually care, scheduling the meeting, having the meeting, and so on and so forth. As leaders in an organization, you will have a very hard time changing an organization without changing the system alongside. One or the other can be a little bit in front, but they need to change more or less in lockstep. Does that mean we can never change an organization? Of course not. All that is really required is that we consciously plan for the changes in the system and support the newly shaped organization. If we consider the system in its current shape and develop a plan for how the system needs to change to enable the new organization, we can change both simultaneously and successfully. Next idea, utilize the material. How often do we hear rather interesting metaphors when we talk about software? Car analogies, buildings, bridges, whatnot. It kind of makes sense that we try to use a metaphor because the material of software is fundamentally different from a physical good and we have no intuition for it. The properties of the material that software is made of are a bit counterintuitive. We are used to physical goods and have a shared understanding of the property of these physical goods, but we don't have the same shared understanding for software. Software development is knowledge work. That also means software is nothing else than clouded conversations, encoded conversations. The value creation that happens when we build software is both in the conversation about what we're trying to solve, as well as the encoding of the actual software. Now, in the physical world, you typically cannot retrofit a tool for an entirely new purpose. Try using a hammer to tighten a screw, try converting a table into a chair, try extending a warehouse to hold 10 times the inventory. But you can change the software to serve a new purpose or an unforeseen demand. It can be made to deliver capabilities that weren't even conceivable when it was originally built. It's incredibly flexible. Over 30 years ago, the first version of Linux shipped, and that was a time when nobody had even smartphones on their mind. Now roughly 50% in this room will probably have a Linux computer in their pocket. All that's trying to say is that the material of software allows us to change it quickly and drastically if the need arises. That also means we don't really need to care what it means for the software to be finished or done. We can say, okay, what are the next steps? Move towards that, update, and move on. If we treat software as if it were a physical good, we lose out on the unique properties, the flexibility to provide value with what we have today, and at the same time, preserving optionality for the future. The fifth idea is professionalism. If we would have a colleague in accounting who would fail to apply double entry bookkeeping as the craft for accounting, we would have a serious problem. Still, we have a lot of discussions in software engineering, also between software engineers, but also with executives, whether or not automated tests are correct, are a good thing to do. Just one example. It's just one example of the discussions that are happening where we don't follow the rules of the trade. If we expect professionals to behave as professionals, that also means to employ the practices that are obviously superior to other practices. Automated testing is clearly one of these examples, and we would never ask an accountant to, quote-unquote, account quicker. It's not a thing that we do. For software development to be successful, there are no shortcuts. Being a professional software developer means to employ the practices that are obviously or evidentially superior. This is our job, and for that we have to continuously look out and try out emerging practices and technologies. This means unproductive time. This means we cannot ship something else. We need to learn what new thing is happening and how we can apply it and how it can create value. And this is where our executives need to come in again and create the space, but not only the space, also the expectation for us practitioners to behave as professionals, and learn the new thing and adopt the new practice and try it out and see whether it fits our current context. So let's do double entry bookkeeping in accounting and in software development alike. With that, I come already to the end of my talk. I hope these few ideas have made you a little bit more interested in what the hell the other person is doing over there. Why it can be worth to have discussions with accountants and your finance people and your CEO and understand the context they are in and understand better what they are trying to achieve, what metrics they are looking at. I'm convinced that we can be significantly more successful if we have more of these conversations, if we create more situational awareness, if we become more financially literate. Thank you very much for your attention, and I think we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Awesome. We have a microphone, so if you have any question, we can hand over the microphone so you can ask your questions. There is a question over there.
For someone coming from like a software background, if you're looking to make organizational changes and you want to figure out how to plan the system accordingly, how would you approach that?
The main question to me would be which interfaces are stable and which interfaces in our software change a lot. And that should roughly follow our communication lines in the sense that we need to have stable interfaces where communication is hard. and we need to have, and we can have quite fluent and often changing interfaces in all of those places where communication is easy. Something like that. Yeah?
Thank you. Any other question? I have the microphone here on the right. No more question? All right, anyway, there is the break. You can reach out to Lars for your question anyway. Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you.
Thank you.